Good morning. I know. If you have chickens, first thing you need to know is you are up at the butt crack of dawn. So, anyways, good morning. I am Amy, and I would like to talk to you about chickens. I love chickens. Anyways, I'm here to help you raise your chickens. I'm going to share in my stories, and hopefully, you don't repeat my mistakes. So, I'll give you all the tips and tricks and everything that I have figured out. I am raising my birds right now, so this is as real as it gets. Today, you are sharing in my first of firsts. This is my first podcast. It's my first attempt. It is my first episode. So I'm going to just let it fly. Oop, no pun intended. Anyway, today I figured because it's spring, everybody's talking about getting babies and raising babies and all the questions, especially for anybody who's new to this. I'm going to try and keep this short and sweet, but I want to give you the basics of getting babies and what to expect. Here we go. The first thing you need to consider is your setup. You have to have space. You need the space to be able to allow the chicks that you're going to get to grow, because when they start small, they only need maybe about a half a square foot per little baby nugget. As they get bigger, they're going to need the space of about one closer to 2 feet or 2 squared feet. Sorry, definitely got to go all the way around the bird as they become adults. And we're kind of talking floor space. When it comes to roosting space, that's a whole nother subject. Your setup, when you're going to bring home those little babies, you need something very sturdy, whatever it is that makes you comfortable. But the idea is this, because it's going to have to grow with the birds, possibly up to 6 weeks. It also needs to have a lid. They'll be flying sooner than you expect. Chickens fly, they're birds. Imagine that. When they're young, they've got energy, they've got spunk, they're going to try and fly everywhere. They're going to chase you, they're going to run away from you. It's hilarious. As they get older, they just plain old get fat and lazy. That's the only reason they don't so much fly, or people don't think they fly. Trust me, the ones that want to, they do. Back to the subject. So your setup, you really need something very sturdy with a lid, and it needs to have the opportunity to grow with your bird. You need a heat source. The babes cannot keep their own heat. They don't know how to moderate their heat. The adults, they actually produce heat. When they're little, not only do you need to keep an eye on the temperature itself, and you're going to put your thermometer at the level of the bird. So as it grows, you'll move it up. It means you're going to start it out about only a couple inches from the ground. You need to know what the bird's temperature is, not what the whole area is. When you do this, I have always used heat lamps. Heat lamps have worked the best for me. I'm not going to scare you, but there is the fire hazard. They're hot. A lot of times when we get talking about, because bedding is going to come into this, they're very hot. You need to secure them. I, of course, overdo. They usually come with a clamp. I take the clamp, I put it on the board or whatever it is that's around there that I've set up for it. I'm keeping it above enough that the birds can't bump into it, but it's still definitely down there next to them. I then take actual wire and I loop it like through the clamp and through the mechanism itself, like the hood of the heat lamp. And then I string that wire to other things so that just in case anything happened. Understand that. Let's get on to the next source. So the next thing is to think about the bedding. I personally use shavings. I've tried straw. In fact, we used to have a farm and stuff, so straw was really easy. Threw it in there. The birds loved it. Oh my gosh, they scratched through everything. But as far as the babies go, straw is not a good idea. As they get bigger, they might love the straw, but straw holds moisture. So it required a lot more care for me. I didn't like it in the long run, but I did try it for a year or so. I've heard about sand. I've never brought sand in, but part of my coop, we did an extension because I seem to have that addiction of chickens and I just keep adding to it. When we did the addition, we decided not to put a floor in it. And chickens being chickens, they dig holes like I hope you don't like your yard because they will dig holes in your yard. And they ate all the grass that was in the area. So it's down to just the sand. So it's perfect for them. So anyways, I use shavings. Personally, I use what's called flake, or it's the bigger shavings. It's not the really small ones. That way it's easier for me to manipulate and it doesn't just turn to dust. You got to make sure you can vent it. This is not saying that it's drafty, two completely different things. But the venting, there's going to be dust. There's not enough moisture with the babies. They haven't produced it enough. But with the bedding and the babies, there's going to be so much dust on everything. It's not like, oh, I haven't dusted my house in a week. This is going to a abandoned house and there is an inch of dust on everything. So don't keep them in your bathtub. All right. That's a bad idea. Keep them outside somewhere. Just make sure that it's insulated and you can keep the temperature gauge. The other ideas when it comes to your food and water, you want to keep it shallow. For the little ones, I use little 3 or 5 gallon refillable. It's got a rim around it. It seems to be shallow enough that if I keep it right on the ground, they can drink from it. They actually can swim, by the way. I just learned this the other day. The little ones, if they were to fall into the water, they wouldn't know how to get back out. Keep it lukewarm or cool. The adult birds, because they actually make their own heat, they require cold water. They, in fact, won't drink warm water. Cold because it helps them retain a certain temperature for their own comfort. The babies, since they don't even retain heat yet, their water needs to be lukewarm, room temperature, not warm, but definitely not cold. And the food, by the way, it's always going to be a starter grower. It kind of changes words depending on which brand you get. A lot of people have thought about doing medicated. I have never done medicated food. Personally, I think about it the same way I would me. If I'm going to introduce medicated food to a baby, then I'm already, although, yeah, great, it might be helping some of the diseases that they could get as a baby because they're always more susceptible. At the same time, it's going to prohibit or kind of limit their own natural body being able to build things. So I do not use medicated. If one gets sick, then they get pulled aside and may possibly get medicated. But other than that, I don't use anything medicated with my birds at all. I do add just a little bit of apple cider vinegar into their water, not very much. I actually add it to the big as well because it is really good for their system. Once you have the babies, the area that I have that I allow them to grow up in, I divide it in half. When they're really tiny, I put a fire blanket because I don't trust just a tarp, but I put a fire blanket down. The heater is in there, their water is in there, their food is in there. It's a real pain because I have to get down, crawl in there. They poop everywhere. So it's messy, but it's a good thing I love these things because you need to monitor their heat. Their first week need to be at 95 degrees. So you need to monitor that heat. It doesn't mean it's warm outside. It doesn't mean you're warm. It doesn't mean that, hey, it's a gorgeous day out. They have to be at 95 degrees. And then every week, the temperature can be dropped by about 5 degrees. So week 2, go to around that 90-ish mark. Week 3, 85 degree. They are considered babies until they are 6 weeks old. At 6 weeks old, they can usually tolerate as low as about 65 degrees. They'll be fully feathered. They're going to be really anxious to join everybody else. So if you have other birds, they're going to be really excited to start trying to join them, which they cannot yet. They're going to be excited to start getting outside. Just be careful of doing it prematurely. The first day you bring them home, birds stress out pretty easily. Don't handle them too much. The very first day you get them, you want to obviously make sure they're all okay. And you need to teach them where the water is. The way you do this is when you put them in, you touch their beak to the water, and that kind of lets them know where they got to find it. They wouldn't know otherwise. When they're young, you're going to actually be constantly monitoring them. I actually check my birds about every 4 hours. Part of that has grown because the adults that I have, did I mention I have like 300 birds now? Yeah, I guess it's the best addiction I can have. When you're monitoring yours, that's how you're going to figure out how much food and water yours need. You want to make sure they get through the day. In my case, I don't neglect giving them food at night, but they learn as it gets to that point in time where they're going to start sleeping, they have less food to pick at while it's nighttime. So I watch their food and I kind of keep it full. You gauge it as it goes, so you learn how much they're eating. I just keep refilling their food and water until the nighttime, and then I kind of let it just run out. And if they're hungry, trust me, there's going to be a mess all over the floor. Anyways, just never let them run out of water. Watch their body language. If they're too hot, they're going to avoid the heat. If they're cold, they're going to huddle under that heat, or they're going to huddle away from a draft. Just look at them before you walk in, before you startle them. That's when you hear about the chickens like smothering each other. If they're cold, they're going to huddle together. They don't care who they step on. But that's kind of true. You're watching for poopy butt. Oh my gosh. I mean, I have a strong stomach and I will do just about everything with my girls. But the whole poopy butt is really gross. They only have one hole. Everything comes out that hole, which means it's also attached to everything inside of their body. Okay, so if you see a baby with a poopy butt, it basically means something got stuck like in their feathers or their down or whatever. Not a big deal. You can put them in a little bit of water so it soaks. You can take a very wet, warm is the key, cloth or something and hold it on it. Think about it the same way you would a child. So you don't want to pull it because a lot of times it's stuck to either little feathers, but it could actually be stuck to some of their insides. So you want to moisten it up enough. And then either you're going to pick at it a little very, very carefully, or sometimes when you go to dry them off, it kind of just falls off. Did you have to watch for that? Make sure during all of this that you are indeed protecting yourself. Wash your hands. Just care, because if you're touching the birds, they can carry things that we really don't want to catch. That way you don't ever put something from the coop or from the chickens into your own food, into your mouth, into your baby, into your family. You know how that works. So you've got your babies. They're in there. They're running around. They're going to start getting feathers probably 3 or 4 weeks. So by that 6th week, they're really anxious and you're going to be wondering if they can go outside. It could be a beautiful 70-degree day outside, but if they're still at where they have to require 80 degrees, it might not be a good idea. The other thing is they need to stay on their diet of the grower and the starter food. Don't introduce snacks. Don't introduce grit. Don't introduce grass. Nothing like that is actually a really good idea until they're in that 5 or 6 week. Even though they're going to be looking like they should go outside, they're going to want to go outside. They may try and follow you out the door, which, by the way, happened to me this morning. It was kind of funny. I had to chase around a whole bunch of babies. The idea is still they need to be monitored. Keep an eye on the temperature and don't rush their diet. Once they're about that 6 weekish, 5, 6 weeks old, that's when their diet can start changing a little bit anyways. They're going to still stay on the starter grower food. In fact, they're going to stay on that quite a while. I want to say almost 4 months. It's a lot longer than I ever think it is. So I always have to check the back of the bag, which there's a tip for you right there. It's on the back of the bag. But they can actually start going out and doing grass, which means they're naturally going to get what's called grit. It's just the stones and stuff. It helps break things down once they're not eating just the starter grower food. They're going to start naturally doing that, but you don't want to rush it. Once they're about 10 or 12 weeks old, on average, they're getting to the size you might be able to introduce them to any other birds if you have some. I don't. I also keep my little coop and stuff. I currently have it inside with the big girls. So they're all sharing a mesh wall. They can see each other. They can smell each other. They can talk to each other, which, by the way, they do. It's hilarious. It's like a phone call. And at the same time, I don't have to intermingle them, so I'm keeping them safe. The big girls, if there's anything that they think is smaller than them, they're going to chase it. If it was a frog or a snake or something like that, they're going to try to eat it. So the baby chicks, if they're not old enough to fend themselves off, The big ones are going to chase them. They don't know any better. You want to kind of hold off before you introduce them until they're about the same size. I personally have introduced them. I've always made sure there's a fence or something, even if it's not introduced except for outside. For a while, I had their coop in somewhere else, and so I had to share a fence where they could talk to each other, see each other. Not a big deal. I always had a couple older girls that would jump over the fence and join them, as long as everybody's playing along nice. There is going to be a pecking order, even when they're little. It just happens. A lot of times the pecking order is they'll pick on the weaker ones, the smaller ones, the ones that are limping, anything like that, they will pick on them. If they're crowded, they will pick on them. They require a bunch of stimulation the older they get. Stimulation could be mirrors, sticks, put anything they can climb in there. I have like the half ladders in there. I put shovels in there so that they can jump on the shovel and slide down it, or just, climb on it. Although do be aware they poop on everything. Once you decide to start letting them go outside, it's a whole nother story for a whole nother day about whether you choose to do free range or not. The only thing is that even if you're going to do free range, don't start them that way. The babies haven't learned enough and they don't know how to get back inside. You need to keep them a penned in area so you can find them at night, which you're going to have to do, and push them in so that they learn to go into the coop at night. The other thing is just a real brief heads up. If you decide to free range when they start laying eggs, it is going to be an Easter egg hunt every single day. They actually don't start laying until probably real close to a 6-month marker. So that 19 to say 22 weeks is when they'll lay their first eggs. They're pretty small. Don't worry about it. Their bodies will grow, and that way their eggs will grow. That's it in a nutshell, or maybe an eggshell, whatever you want to call it. If you find you like this, grow with me. I'm going to keep this up and keep teaching you what I know. I'll start adding pictures and all kinds of fun things like that too. Feel free to subscribe to my website, The Shit Chicks Say, because they do have a lot to say. All right. You have a fantastic day. And this is Amy, absolutely proud of being a crazy chicken lady.